There's something I've noticed over many years of watching how people handle money. They get a raise, but their loans barely change. Some of them even feel more pressure than before. What's interesting is this doesn't happen because they're reckless. And it's not because they don't want to get out of debt. Most people genuinely believe, if I just make a little more money, things will finally feel lighter. But reality doesn't work that way. I realize that a salary increase doesn't automatically make you wealthier. It just reveals how you think about money. And if that thinking doesn't change, higher income simply makes the same old loop run faster. In this video, I'm going to share what I've observed about why raises don't reduce debt the way we expect. This isn't textbook theory. It's about small psychological shifts, the quiet ones that actually control your cash flow every month. Main point 1. A raise changes your sense of enough, not your debt structure. I've realized that when someone gets a raise, the first thing that changes isn't their bank account. It's how they feel. They feel like they've moved up. They feel more deserving. They feel like they can finally breathe a little, and that feeling quietly resets what they consider a reasonable standard of living. Most people don't spend more because they're greedy. They spend more because they're trying to align their life with their new income. Here's a simple example. Before, a $150 office chair felt perfectly fine. After the raise, you start thinking, I sit 8 hours a day. It makes sense to invest in something better. So you buy the $400 chair instead. Nothing wrong with that. The problem is, upgrades like this don't happen once. They happen in multiple areas at the same time. A slightly better phone, a slightly nicer vacation, a slightly higher quality of food. Each decision feels reasonable, but together, they create an entirely new spending level. Meanwhile, the loan stays exactly the same. The repayment schedule doesn't change just because you feel better off. Here's the paradox I've seen over and over. When income goes up, people raise their lifestyle first, and only later think about increasing their debt payments. And by the time they think about paying down debt faster, there isn't as much extra left as they imagined. This isn't about lacking discipline. It's about how the brain prioritizes improving the present before optimizing the future. If you don't intentionally step in and adjust your repayment structure the moment your income rises, your money will automatically drift toward comfort. That's the human default. And that's why, a year after getting a raise, so many people look back and ask, why am I still paying off debt at the same speed? Main point 2. The brain treats loans as already handled. I noticed something interesting in the way people talk about their loans. They rarely say, I'm redesigning my repayment strategy. They usually say, I make my payment every month. That sounds normal, but it reveals something important. In their mind, the loan is already set, like rent, like utilities, a fixed number, a repeated action, something that doesn't need further thought. The problem is, when income increases, attention shifts to new possibilities, saving more, trying investments, buying something you've postponed, and the loan? It keeps running quietly in the background. Most people rarely sit down and ask one simple question. Could I be paying this off faster? Not because they can't, but because they never create the moment to reassess. I've seen people who could easily add an extra $100 or $200 a month toward their loan, and never do, because in their mind, the loan is under control. And here's the thing. The brain dislikes changing systems that seem stable. As long as there's no urgent pressure, we keep things as they are. Ironically, a raise reduces that urgency. You feel less stressed. You feel more in control, but interest doesn't care how you feel. It keeps calculating the same way. If you don't treat a raise as a checkpoint to reevaluate your system, your loan will continue on its original path. Not faster, not slower, just steady. And steady is exactly how people stay stuck longer than they expected. Main point 3. When pressure drops, action drops. Two, I've realized that some of the strongest financial decisions people make happen when they're under pressure, when money feels tight, when the end of the month feels close, when the debt number makes them slightly uncomfortable. That discomfort creates momentum. But when income increases, the first thing that disappears isn't the loan. It's the pressure. You sleep a little better. You stop checking your account every day. Small, unexpected expenses don't scare you as much and your brain interprets that relief as a signal. Things are fine now. Once the brain believes things are fine, it stops pushing for aggressive action. Debt tends to shrink fastest when it still feels uncomfortable, when it becomes just a normal responsibility. Its priority drops. I've watched this happen many times. Someone used to be highly motivated to pay off debt early. They tracked every expense. They cut back intentionally. After getting a raise, they still make their payments on time, but they stop talking about paying it off early. They stop calculating the impact, not because they're lazy, but because in their perception, things are stable. The problem is, interest doesn't slow down just because you feel better. Time doesn't stretch out just because you're less stressed. Here's the paradox. Short-term financial comfort can quietly slow down long-term financial freedom, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the brain prefers maintaining present comfort over optimizing distant outcomes. If you don't create a clear reason to keep accelerating debt repayment, everything drifts toward good enough. And good enough is where many loans end up staying for years. Main point 4. Higher income often creates bigger commitments. I've noticed something subtle about people who get raises. They don't necessarily spend impulsively. They commit. That sounds positive, right? But here's the issue. Financial commitments often last longer than the emotional boost from a raise. A simple example. You used to pay $800 in rent. After your raise, you think, I could move somewhere a little bigger, a little more comfortable. Now you're paying $1,200. No one did anything wrong, but you just added a permanent $400 increase to your fixed expenses. Or you upgrade your car, or choose a higher insurance plan, or sign up for more monthly subscriptions. Each decision makes sense on its own, but they share one trait. They're hard to reverse. Flexible money helps you attack debt faster. Money locked into fixed commitments doesn't. When income rises, many people unconsciously turn the increase into new obligations. A few months later, they look around and think, I'm making more than before, so why don't I feel like I have more? It's not that income isn't enough. It's that flexibility has decreased. Financial freedom doesn't come from earning more alone. It comes from maintaining space between your income and your obligations. That space is where you attack debt. When that space disappears, even with a higher salary, you're still moving at the same pace. I once spoke with someone whose income had nearly doubled over several years, but their loan balance was shrinking very slowly. Not because they were reckless, but because every time their income increased, their lifestyle scaled up to match it. And every upgrade came with a long-term bill. Here's the key insight. Getting a raise isn't dangerous. Expanding fixed commitments too quickly is, because once fixed costs rise, you lose options. And once you lose options, paying off debt early becomes a wish, not a decision. Main point 5. A raise doesn't fix your habits. It just amplifies the ones you already have. I've realized something a lot of people don't like hearing. Money doesn't change you as fast as we think it will. It mostly just turns up the volume on how you already operate. If you used to spend emotionally when you were stressed, a higher income simply lets you spend more during those moments. If you didn't track your spending closely before, a raise just makes the gap bigger. Most people believe their problem is, I'm not making enough. But when I look at real behavior, I usually see something else. The issue is often structure. Here's a simple example. Someone doesn't have a habit of assigning their money the moment they get paid. They just spend as they go. And at the end of the month, they check what's left. After they get a raise, they do the exact same thing. Only one thing changes. Each decision costs more. No new system, no new rules, no new priorities. So the loan doesn't change either. I've noticed a lot of people wait for income to go up so they can fix everything. But income is just raw material. If the way you run your money doesn't change, more raw material just makes the same old machine run harder. And what's interesting is when your salary increases, it's easy to feel like you've made financial progress. That feeling is nice. But feeling like you're progressing is not the same as actual progress. If you don't set a very clear rule, like every time I get a raise, X% goes straight to debt payoff, then that extra money will slide right back into the old pattern. Your brain always chooses the familiar path, and the familiar path is rarely the most efficient one. Here's the blunt truth. More income doesn't automatically make you more disciplined. It just gives you more chances to act the same way you used to. And if the old way wasn't helping you pay off debt faster, it'll keep your loan right where it is. Main point 6. When income goes up, you start seeing yourself differently. And that changes how you spend. I've noticed something pretty interesting. A raise doesn't just change the number in your bank account. It changes how you see yourself. You start thinking, I'm at a different level now. I'm not in the old stage anymore. I should be living in a way that matches where I am. That sounds completely reasonable. The problem is, your identity upgrades faster than your money habits. Most people don't notice that once they feel like they've moved up, they start looking for ways to express that progress, not to show off, but to confirm it to themselves. A very everyday example. Before budget travel felt normal, after a raise, you start thinking, I worked this hard. Don't I deserve a better hotel? Or you start choosing nicer restaurants when you're with friends. No one is forcing you. You're the one trying to match your life to your new self-image. And I've realized something. Debt often doesn't fit the image of I've leveled up. It feels awkward. But instead of attacking it aggressively, the brain often does the opposite. It focuses on building the new lifestyle first. Because lifestyle gives instant emotional rewards. Debt payoff gives slow rewards you barely feel day to day. What's interesting is, a lot of people start spending to reinforce this new identity, while their real financial identity, meaning their ability to control cash flow, hasn't actually changed. So the gap quietly widens. I've seen people who make way more money than they used to, but their money stress doesn't really go down because their spending has been adjusted to fit the new level. Debt becomes annoying, but not annoying enough to trigger strong action. Here's the important thing I've learned. If your identity upgrades before your financial system upgrades, you'll build a life that looks like progress, but it's still tied down by debt. And that's why raises sometimes don't feel as freeing as we expect. Main point 7. If you don't decide in advance, extra money gets spread everywhere. I've noticed this very clearly when I look at people's cash flow after a raise. The money doesn't disappear in one big decision. It gets sliced up. A little more for family, a little more for friends, a little more for experiences, a little more to treat yourself. Each piece makes sense. But because there's no clear priority decision up front, the extra income gets scattered before it ever has a chance to create real impact. Most people don't realize money only creates real change when you concentrate it. Adding a small amount to your loan payment each month might not feel exciting, but if you set aside a clear, fixed portion from the beginning, the impact compounds fast. On the other hand, when money gets divided based on moods and situations, it feels like you used it in meaningful ways. But at the end of the year, the loan balance hasn't moved much. And I realized the problem isn't what you're spending on. It's that you didn't decide before the money hit your account. When income goes up, if you don't clearly say, this portion goes here, and it does not go anywhere else, then your brain will automatically allocate it to whatever feels most attractive in the moment. A surprise trip feels more exciting than cutting 6 months off your loan. A new purchase feels more fun than saving a few $100s in future interest. And the interesting part is, the brain always chooses visible rewards. So if you don't build a system that protects that extra income, it gets consumed without creating a real leap forward. Here's a simple rule I've learned. Money without a plan follows emotions. Money with a plan follows goals. And a raise is just an opportunity. Whether it becomes real progress depends on whether you decide ahead of time. Main point 8. You underestimate interest because it doesn't make noise. I've noticed a lot of people can tell you exactly what they spent money on, but they can't tell you how much interest they're paying every month. Interest is quiet. It doesn't create strong emotions. It doesn't hurt immediately. It doesn't force you to swipe your card. It just exists. And because it exists quietly, we tend to underestimate it. After a raise, a lot of people think, I feel more comfortable now. But they don't ask, how much am I paying each month just to keep this loan alive? I've met people with pretty solid incomes who still lose a meaningful amount every month to interest alone. If they redirected even part of their raise into extra payments, they could shorten the loan significantly. But because interest doesn't make noise, it doesn't create enough urgency. What's interesting is humans react strongly to things that are obvious and immediate. A bill suddenly jumps, you notice. A fee hits your account, you feel it. But steady monthly interest gets treated like just part of the game. And I've realized this. A raise only really matters for your loan when you look straight at the interest number and understand this. Every month you delay, you're paying extra money for your past. Not to buy anything new, just to maintain an old obligation. When you start seeing interest as an active cost, you can reduce instead of a fate you just accept. The way you use your extra income changes. But if interest stays blurry in your mind, a raise will only make you breathe easier, not make the loan disappear faster. Main point 9. You confuse stability with progress. I've noticed something subtle in how people judge their finances. They say, I'm making my payments. I'm not late. Everything is fine. And yes, things might be fine. But fine is not the same as progress. Most people don't realize repayment systems are designed for stability. They keep you from falling into crisis. But they're not designed to get you out of debt as fast as possible. After a raise, you might feel like you've entered a new stage. More income, less stress. Your account balance looks bigger. But if your debt payoff speed hasn't changed, you're moving alongside the loan, not ahead of it. I once asked someone, if your income went up 30%, how much faster is your debt shrinking? They couldn't answer because they'd never measured it that way. What's interesting is we're great at measuring income, but we rarely measure the speed of becoming debt-free. We celebrate earning more. But we almost never celebrate cutting years off a loan. And here's what I've realized. Stability can create an illusion. It makes you feel like you're moving forward when really you've just gotten used to your current situation. If you don't intentionally increase your payoff speed, the loan will finish the exact path it was programmed to finish. Not faster, not earlier. And at some point, you may realize you spent years simply maintaining. Fine. Main point 10. Every raise is a short transition window. Miss it, and you'll wait a long time for the next chance. I've realized that every time income changes, there's a short period when things are still flexible. You haven't fully adapted to the new lifestyle yet. You haven't raised your spending baseline. You haven't reset your expectations. That's when your system is easiest to change. But most people treat a raise like a reward. They think about upgrading life first. And once the new lifestyle settles in, going back and tightening things up to pay debt faster becomes emotionally difficult. What's interesting is people change easier at the beginning than in the middle. If in the very first month after a raise you decide a fixed portion of this raise will automatically go to debt payoff, then that decision becomes your new default. You adjust your life around what's left. But if you wait a few months, spending has already expanded. At that point, increasing debt payments feels like cutting back, and your brain fights it. I've learned this. Money doesn't automatically organize itself in the smartest way. It follows the structure you build. If you don't redesign the structure when income changes, you get pulled back into the old orbit, and you may have to wait until the next raise to get another real shot. I've realized a raise isn't the solution, it's a test of whether you change how you run your money. If the old habits are still there, more income just makes the old loop run at a larger scale. But if you treat every raise as a restructuring point, a moment to reset priorities, then your loan will finally start shrinking in a way you can actually feel. Not because you make more, but because you're directing money with intention. If you saw yourself in anything I just said, pick one point and fix that first. You don't need to change everything at once, just one intentional change. And if this video helped you see money a little more clearly, hit like and subscribe. I'll keep sharing calm, practical insights on money psychology and wealth behavior. I'll see you in the next video.